My name is Monk Rowe, and we're filming for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive in San Francisco. I'm pleased to have drummer Vince Ladiano with me today. When you come into town and you look at the local papers and stuff, it looks like there's a very active jazz scene here. But I wonder if it's like that all the time.
Well, people say that. They come and just like what you're saying, and it can be deceiving. There is an active jazz scene. First, I should say that. I mean, there are a lot of people here that make their living playing jazz, but the listings sometimes you have, several listings, and it might be music in a restaurant, which could be jazz, but it also could be wallpaper. And we've all been there, but and there is a difference. I say the same thing that I have a friend that lives in Los Angeles, and I've seen this Los Angeles newspaper. I said, man, there's really a lot going on. He says, well, I don't know. He says the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's a vibrant scene. I mean, you can make a living here.
That's saying something.
Exactly. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I was when I moved here, 35 years ago, I guess, 66. I was on my way somewhere else.
Oh.
I just got out of the service, and I was visiting friends here, and I thought, well, I'd go to LA or New York. I mean, that's where the music business is. And I got here, and I just started hanging out and playing. I thought, and I really like the climate and the town and the people that, just really appeals to me.
Right.
And I just kept staying here, and here I am, But I've hooked up with bands and traveled and everything, but so you can make a living here.
Yeah. What's a typical week like for you in this area? I mean, most musicians need to do a lot of different things. Is that the case for you?
Yes. I'm fortunate in that I've been involved in this one little club called Jazz at Pearls, which is the local jazz club. By local, they use local musicians. It's not like Yoshi's across the bay it's the national or international club. People come from all over the world to play Yoshi's, But Jazz at Pearls is our little neighborhood jazz club, and I came with the place 12 years ago. So you probably have seen that's why you see my name.
I see your name.
I'm there 3 nights a week. He just gave it to me. I started out, I worked for this Sonny Buxton, who is someone you should talk to, I think, maybe. Anyway, Sonny, very interesting man. He had a club, a former club called Milestones. I worked there, and when he and Pearl Wong opened this club 12 years ago, they didn't know what they were going to do on weeknights. The weekends, they knew what they wanted to do. So I started playing, taking a little trio in there on weeknights, and it was sort of week to week, and then after a few weeks or months, he just said, why don't you just let me know when you can't be here?
Oh.
Which
I like those kind of gigs. I have one at home, actually.
Oh yeah? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I did it with Bruce Foreman, a great guitarist, for several years because we were neighbors, and then he left the area. He's now living in Carmel Valley, so he's not available. And I had another piano player right after him for several years. So in other words, I had the same guys. And then Al Plank is this piano player who's a wonderful, wonderful musician. And he had some surgery last, I guess, December, and he's recovered, but he's just doesn't want to do anything right now. He's just kind of taking a little hiatus. So I've been using different people, or I should say the club owner books different people. So every night I walk in and play with a different piano player or guitar player. There's like a pool of people.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting. I get the bass player, and it's right down the street from my house. I've kind of died and went to Birdland.
Wow, that's great. I'll have to see if I can get in there before we leave.
Yes,
it's probably close to this.
Yeah, it's Columbus
Yeah.
Avenue. You go, I guess it would be west or east rather. I'm sorry, go the other way, and it's right near the heart of North Beach.
Great. In reading your bio, it looks like you were influenced by a musical family in your youth, but not your own.
Right. I grew up in Sacramento, and which is not far from here, and There was a family in the neighborhood that the father had done some conducting in Hollywood and so on and so forth, and they'd moved up, and they had a couple of brothers and a daughter, sister, and they were all involved, and we used to have rehearsals in there just right down the street. So when I was very small, I would sit outside and watch them rehearse, and went, wow, I gotta figure this out. I'm talking about preschool,
Whoa.
4 and 5, and just hearing this music. And my family, my immediate family, they weren't musicians, but they liked to have a good time, and so I got to hear a lot of music, And then the California State Fair was like near my house, so every summer everybody would come through there and play. So I heard a lot of live music, and I was inspired by that to do something. I mean, I played the trumpet first, and I switched to drums when I was in high school, and I don't know, it just plus public schools in those days, we're talking the 50s, I'm making a living on what I learned in public schools. I mean, I didn't go to college, I mean, I started college and lasted about a month. I couldn't stand it. I had to go. That's the Carmen Caballero thing, he had popped up, so I grabbed it just to get out of town,
Really?
And
Yeah.
I mean, but it was a good gig. It was a demanding gig. I learned a lot, and I saw the country.
You were only 18 at the time?
Yeah, I was 18.
What did your parents think about that?
Well, they were very supportive. They were, they were blue-collar people, and they tried to warn me of the pitfalls, and they were right. They said, it's a pretty rough way to make a living. What are you going to do when there's no work and so on for you? Job security and so forth. And I said, I don't know. And we all go through that. And they were right, and it's the same.
Yeah.
There's work and there's no work, and
Right.
but you have to learn to deal with it, and it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
You're a musician.
I'm a musician.
What do you play?
I'm a saxophone player.
All right.
Yeah.
So
But I do lots of things too.
Well, I mean, you asked me about doing other things,
Right.
and how, and I've sort of avoided the teaching per se. I mean, I give an occasional lesson, but I don't have a stable of students or a place,
Yeah.
But I am involved, and I have been since its inception for 20 years now. The Monterey Jazz Festival has a jazz educational program that was started around 83, I guess, or 84. Jimmy Lyons, who ran the festival for so many years, he and the then musical director, Mundell Lowe, got the idea to put music or music education in Monterey County, which is the home of the Monterey Jazz Festival, as a give back, as a gift. So they started with 3 clinicians, myself, Bill Berry.
Yeah.
Have you talked to Bill
Yeah.
Berry? Yeah. Is he great?
What a nice guy.
Oh, he's great. I love Bill Berry. Bill Berry, myself, and a very fine musician from this Santa Cruz area named Paul Contos, a reed player, very good. The 3 of us started, and when they tapped me, I'd worked the festival a few times with Cal Jader and some other people. And so Jimmy says, you want to do this thing? And I said, I'm not a teacher. I wouldn't know where to begin. I mean, it's true. I mean, you need an educator. He said, no. Mundell said, we want players just to go in and impart your experience. I said, okay, I'll try it. 20 years later,
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. I really do.
Well, I think it's an important thing that teachers of jazz, and I suppose you could say this about anything, but especially of jazz, ought to be players first. And I'm not sure that's the norm anymore in the universities.
Well, universities, I don't know. I don't spend much time in universities. I go into just middle schools and high schools.
Yeah.
And the band directors at most of these places are not jazz musicians, And but the high school I went to, the band director was not a jazz musician, but he was a good musician, and he was very open, and he encouraged, and myself, Rufus Reed, He was a year behind me. Mel Martin, I don't know if you talked to Mel.
I did not.
And a few other guys that have made a living playing music went to this school and were lucky enough to be under the tutelage of this man, Aubrey Penman. And he wasn't a jazz musician, but he gave us our head. He said, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
You know, so it can work,
Uh-huh.
but it helps. You know, I wish, like, we go into a school and while the band's rehearsing, and I sidle up next to the drummers, and you know, just make friends, and they
Right.
play, and then I'll point something out on the chart or the equipment, or it's like real hands-on, like an hour thing. You know,
Yeah.
it's not a one-on-one private lesson, but and then all the time I'm giving them some pointers, or so I demonstrate. You know,
Right.
and I wish somebody had done that for me. You know, I mean, I didn't have that benefit. I had to really go find places to watch musicians play. You know,
Right.
you know.
Did you choose to go in the service?
Well,
This
I was drafted.
You were drafted. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
When
I mean,
was that?
It was it was 1963. In fact, I was thinking about that today. Today is August the 8th, and it's Benny Carter's 95th birthday,
Yeah.
which is, I played with Benny Carter twice, and my idol, you know.
Yeah.
But today, I thought, August the 8th, that's the day I got drafted, you know, many, many years ago.
63.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, I mean, you know, in those days, you just, was, like I said, pre-Vietnam when
Right.
stuff really hit the fan, you know. And so there was no thought of resisting, or, you know, people got drafted, and
You did it.
hope you didn't get drafted,
Right.
you know. But I ended up in a band,
Hmm.
and wasn't that bad,
Yeah.
you know. Practiced a lot.
Most musicians that I've talked to have been fortunate in that they ended up in some kind of band.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you have an option. If you enlist, you can pick your station, or you could pick a band and a station if you could qualify. And if you get drafted, it's the luck of the draw, you know. So and if you enlist, it's 3 years, and if you get drafted, it's 2 years. So I just said, I'll just take my chances, you know. So I ended up in a band, you know, and it was okay. Still
March.
the Army.
Marching and
Oh,
so
yeah.
forth. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. As I like to say, somebody says, were you in the service? I said, yeah, our side, you know. I fought and I fought. They took me anyway. Boom, you
Yeah,
know.
right. So after you got out and you're surveying the scene, and you ended up here,
Yeah.
and what was your first, I guess, break that you might call it?
After I moved here,
Yeah.
I start, you know, you move someplace and you're at the bottom of the list, you know, because I didn't know that many people here. And I guess I started playing with Vince Guaraldi
Yeah.
sort of immediately. After I wasn't here that long, and I started doing some stuff with him. And that helped, you know. I didn't play on a regular basis, but I used to play. He changed things around. He was trying different stuff, you
Yeah.
know. And
Was this? I'm trying to remember when he had his kind of hit with "Cast Your Fate."
oh,
to
this
the
was
Wind.
after that.
Was
Yeah,
after that.
yeah. That Cast Your Fate, I think, happened in the early '60s, like maybe '61 or '62 or '3, right in there. And I wasn't here yet.
Okay.
So yeah, he was already on the map. He was a favorite around here. And then when I got with him, he was doing the Charlie Brown stuff, you know. And in fact, I did one of those. I did a TV, I think it's called the Charlie Brown Valentine special or something like that,
Yeah.
where we did the
So if you were to watch that on TV, you'd be listening to yourself.
yeah, yeah, you know. And Vince was a character, and he was a good musician, and you know, I got to do that for a while, and so associating with somebody like that, it put you out, they put your name out there, you know.
Right.
So that was probably the first, and then I got in with a guy, the drummer, the guy that was doing all the work here, real good drummer named John Markham. He's deceased now, and he it was like a big band drummer, but he could do everything. And he was, at that time, he was working with Frank Sinatra when Sinatra was working or going out of town. And so we got to, I don't know, he heard me play somewhere, and I started subbing for him. And so that helped, you know. And, you know, that's the way it is in music, you know. You just go and you just get in line and start appearing and, you know, trying to get your foot in the door, get work, because you got to work.
What would a typical club date have paid in the mid-'60s, late '60s in this area?
Well, what you call a club date, we call a casual.
Okay.
Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about, other than,
Right.
yeah, a club date? Or what do they call it in Boston? General business?
They do?
Yeah, GB or something like that.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. Anyway, God, I don't know. It was, well, let's put it this way. When I moved here in '66, my rent was $75 a month. So,
And I bet it's not that now.
no, it isn't. Ooh, this town.
I've
brutal.
heard it's like the
It's brutal.
second highest
Yeah,
in the
I'm
country.
sure it
or something.
is. It's, yeah, it's not for everybody. You got to really want to live here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. But at that time, if
Yeah,
if
it was,
made $50 on a date.
Yeah,
that
it
would've
was.
been-
It was probably something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. You know.
I see you worked with Woody Herman.
Briefly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sal Nistico was on the band.
Yeah.
God, what a monstrous
Oh,
player.
he
huh?
was a wonderful, wonderful musician and a great guy. I really, you know, treasure that moment or that
Yeah.
little bit of time, you know, where we got to. And then we remained friends. And when he came through, whenever he came through town, like he was here with a couple different people. He was here with Tito Puente once. He was here with Gap Mangione in a little band. Different people, and we'd always get together and hang out. You know, I miss him. He was a
Yeah.
great guy, great player.
Do you consider yourself a big band drummer?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, actually, I did it. You know, I mean, that was part of my experience and training coming up, and a lot of the gigs that we did in casuals or club dates had to do with big bands. You know, so that was a skill that was valuable, and I sort of spent some time at it, and then I didn't do it for a long time. You know, I just there weren't any gigs, and I stopped making rehearsal bands and stuff like that. And then this Club Pearls where I work has a Monday night big band, and I used to sub in that once in a while. And now I'm kind of doing it on a regular basis. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really having a. Of course, the band plays a lot of Thad Jones material and Oliver Nelson material, and Frank Foster and stuff like that. So it's all fun to play, you know. And I guess because I've been doing it a long time, and I'm older, I'm just better at it. You know. At least I think so.
Well, who were the people that influenced you, drummers, along the way?
Well, in big bands were when I was in high school. That was when I first started playing. I was really drawn to big bands, and the Kenton Band, and of course Basie and Duke, all those guys. You know, Sonny Payne. I remember seeing him when I was just starting out, and I was just floored. I thought he was just
He had a lot of
most exciting.
style. didn't
Oh,
he?
he was just, I mean, he had it all, you know, for a big band. He could play the, you know, I mean, he was just so dynamic, you know. I mean, here this band is just quietly steaming along, and all of a sudden it would explode, you know, right in front of your eyes, you know, and it was just like, and when you're a kid especially, it would just
Yeah.
like throw
Yeah.
your back, you know, and then he was so much fun to watch, you know. And I don't play anything like that, you know, but he knocked me out. And of course, then later on, you know, Shelly Manne and Mel Lewis, you know, Woodyard, who I love,
Yeah,
Sam Woodyard.
Sam.
Oh man, you know, that kind of thing. And then
Right.
then I started listening to all kind. You know, I got more into Blakey and Max and Philly Joe and Roy Haynes and those guys. You know,
Mhm.
and there are just so many guys. You know, and then all the new guys that come along, it just gets better and better. You know, technically.
Right. What's it like trying to absorb the Latin end of things? Because I know you worked with
With Cal Jader.
Cal Jader.
Yeah, well, that was a piece of luck because I was thrown in with Poncho Sanchez, and a mutual friend of Cal's and mine was a great musician, drummer, vibist John Ray, and he had worked with Cal, and he'd worked with Vince Guaraldi and Herbie Mann. He was he lived out here, but he was originally from Boston and spent a lot of time in New York. I played with Shearing and played vibes with Shearing.
Ooh.
Great musician. And he's gone. And anyway, we were good friends, and he told me Cal was looking for somebody. You want to do it? And I said, well, you know, I knew a little. I had a little Latin experience, but I'm a jazz drummer that plays Latin music. You know, I'm not a Latin drummer.
Yeah.
You know, but you had to do both with Cal. You know, he used to say it's like turning a little switch in your mind. You know, you sit down, you play one style of music. He liked jazz, maybe Philly Joe or something, and then as soon as you start playing the other thing, it was kind of like a Tito Puente. That was his frame of reference.
Yeah.
And so I had a little knowledge going in. I had enough that I was accepted, and then Poncho was there, and Poncho would just say, yeah, no, you know, whatever, when we're playing, you know, do that, don't do that, you know. So he helped me a lot, you know. But like I said, I'm still, compared to what's happening, you know.
If someone says play a merengue as opposed to, I don't know,
Yeah.
salsa beat,
Yeah.
do you know what that means specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different
Yeah, there is.
categories
Yeah.
that
I do. But there are a lot that I don't know, I'm sure. But I found out that, like, it's regional. You know, what we consider, I mean, like, of course, Afro-Cuban, Cuba, and that big influence, you know, the salsa. And then every country has its own groove, and I think the merengue came from Santo Domingo. So if you do a little research, you'll find out each country had its way of doing things.
Yeah.
You know, like the Cubans have a carnival, like all those countries, and when they go down the street, they play a groove called the comparsa, or Mozambique. You know, and the Brazilians, of course, do samba, and it's very similar, but it's different. So a little subtle understanding of that kind of thing helps. You know?
Yeah. I actually have a piece of music to play here, and I suppose this could be like a blindfold test, but, but it's not. I wouldn't do that to you. This is actually you. I think it's you.
Yeah, I recognize that. Where are we? Well, that's like a sort of a bossa groove. That kind of thing, you know.
Who would that? This is from a video. San Diego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was with the band a month.
You were just with a month.
Yeah, I
at
just
that
started
point.
with the band. That was early 78. I joined Cal in, I guess around May of 78. And Claire Fisher and Poncho, Rob Fisher, myself, and Cal. And we were, there was a great gig in San Diego, a place called the Catamaran in Mission Bay. It was like a musician's dream kind of gig where you go and you're in a hotel sort of right on the water. You know, it's like a thing you fantasize about.
Yeah.
You know, and you come down the elevator, and you go into the club and play. You know what I mean?
And the breaks, you can go back up to your
Yeah,
room, whatever.
exactly, exactly. And it's just this kind of great scene. Yeah, and I did that quite a few times with Cal. And while we were there, we went out to the college. I think is where we did that. We went to a college, maybe San Diego State or something like that. And they had a little studio, and they had a sort of a mock nightclub.
Uh-huh.
You know, they had a few tables around where the camera could pick it up and people sitting, you know, like in a
Right.
club. And what I remember about that date was that they had me on a riser, and there wasn't room for my floor tom. So I had, you know, which was fine. I mean, you know, so you don't need a lot of drums to get away with what you have to do, you know. But I mean, it was like kept trying to figure out how to. I move the drum. No, I guess not. Hell with it, you know. It's not going to happen, you know.
I guess the percussions will play a little more tonight.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a great experience. You know, I'm having played with those musicians. You know,
Yeah.
because it rubs off. You know, you're around them and you get.
I didn't know that it was Claire Fisher in that.
Mm-hmm.
They were playing the Fender Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't like to play the piano.
Really?
Well, he said there weren't any good pianos.
Okay.
You
At
ever
least he
talked
knew
to
what he
Claire?
was going to be playing.
Yeah. You ever talk to Claire?
No.
Oh, you got to talk to Claire.
I'd
man.
love to. Maybe
oh,
we can.
oh.
Is he in L.A.?
Yeah.
Okay.
Studio City.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a brilliant, you know,
Uh-huh.
musician, composer. I'll leave it right there.
Okay. I can tell. I can read between the lines that it would be an interesting.
Yeah, very.
Well, and Cal, unfortunately, you were with him. I mean,
Mhm.
you were playing with him when he passed away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Almost 4 years to the day, almost. He passed away in the Philippines, in Manila, on Cinco de Mayo, 5th of May.
Mm-hmm.
82. So I joined May 78, so 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a sad, tragic situation.
Uh-huh.
We went. He had. He was in the service during World War II. He was in the Navy, and I think he was a corpsman, a medical corpsman, and he was in the Philippines during, towards the end of the war, and he sort of had an affinity for the place. In fact, if you do any research on his compositions, he wrote tunes with, Mindanao. He wrote, there were 3 or 4 tunes with Philippine island titles, or, So he'd been asked to go there a few times and sort of always put it off. And then his health wasn't good. And when he decided to go, because they'd been asking him to go, his wife didn't want him to go, but we went, and she went with him, and we got there. We didn't play a note. We got there, it was a long flight. We got there on early Monday morning, and he was restless, and Tuesday he wasn't feeling good, and then Tuesday evening he went into a cardiac arrest and passed away the next day. So it was very, very unusual situation. To be that far away, and then we had to wait 4 or 5 days before we could all leave together, because we weren't leaving otherwise,
Yeah.
without Cal, and because of the bureaucratic thing,
Right.
and it was, it took a while to come back from that,
Yeah.
Plus he was he was a wonderful guy, funny, a good guy to work for, and obviously a good musician.
One of the first to really popularize the kind of world music type.
He was a pioneer. Yeah, he was. He was working with George Shearing. Cal is from here, from the West Coast. He's from San Mateo, which is down the peninsula. He and Merv Griffin went to school together, went to prep school or high school together, you know, so they were buddies. But anyway, Cal, you know, kind of a self-taught player, but worked with George Shearing for a while. And while he was with George Shearing in New York, Al McKibben was on the band, and Al took him around the corner to the Palladium one night, and he heard Tito Puente and Machito playing in a ballroom and flipped. And he just never heard anything like that, he said, you know. And so he got this idea that when he came back here after he left Shearing, to put a Latin jazz thing together, which is what he did. He had guys from here that could play both, because they had to play both ways, you know. And then he said that then they would barnstorm, where they'd get in a car and go across the country and work all these places between here and New York, where they had never heard anything like that, never heard Latin music. In fact, it was, he ran into some resistance in some places, he said. They didn't want to hear that, you know. And so he was a pioneer, you know. Of course, I think Dizzy was the first guy. Or actually, was it Mario Bauza? Is he the guy that...
He was with Dizzy, wasn't he? Or
well, I think he was with
that
Machito.
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, I'm talking about Latin jazz. I think Dizzy with Chano Pozo was the first real jazz musician to, you know, cross over like that. But you know, a guy you should talk to is John Santos. Has his name come up?
No.
He lives in the Bay Area. He's a Latin musician, but he's a walking history book.
Wow.
He's real interesting in the history of the music, you know. Anyway.
Okay.
But yeah, Cal was a pioneer, and he until, I guess, I'm trying to think of what put him on the map. I guess Soul Sauce, Wachiwata, was the first real national kind of hit in the early 60s. And I was with him when the 1980, he won a Grammy.
Right.
Yeah, and I was on that record, you know, which is sort of a...
As a sideman on that record, do you get anything?
I got a hearty handshake.
Yeah, right. It'd be nice if you got like a certificate or something.
Well, you know, Carl Jefferson from Concord Records gave us each plaques.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
You know, in commemoration.
Right.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, man, that's how it works. You know.
Do you ever get? I don't know if royalties is the right word.
That's the right word. No.
Okay.
I don't have any tunes in any publisher. You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
But so it's for playing on things, you don't get.
Yeah. You get paid for the date, and
right.
You know, I mean, look at what the Jimmy Cobb. You know.
Oh, yeah.
He's on probably the most famous jazz record in the world, and I think he made a couple $100 or something. You know.
Right. That is amazing.
You know.
Think of that.
Yeah. Jimmy Cobb, that's another one. My favorite. Boy, I love that guy.
Reissued and you know.
Yeah.
There's been books about it.
I know. You know, movies. You know.
Yeah. God, you can't eat fame though.
Yeah. But you know, I mean, you sort of know that going in. I mean, I guess some guys get bitter about it, and but if your name isn't on the sign, you know, I mean, if you're not the leader, and
right,
you know, I mean, it's just like, you know, you contributed somehow. You were there, and your presence, you know, but it just doesn't seem to work that way.
Right. You got an awful long list of people you've played with or recorded with, and I just wondered about a few of them. Chet Baker.
Well, Chet was a gypsy. You know, he'd come here and go there and do this. And when he came to the Bay Area, like a lot of people.
Yeah.
But that's another benefit of living here, is that people do come through here, and I get to play with them.
Yeah.
You know, so but Chet was one of them. He was a character, a very good musician, a very natural, you know. I don't think he ever practiced or really worked at it. I think he just had it, you know. I don't know. But he he obviously had his how do I put this? His agenda.
His agenda.
Yeah, you know, and that was. I mean, I saw him way down and way up. You know, I mean, I'll never forget one time we were playing a club here called Kimball's. It's a nice little club behind the Symphony Hall, and we met. We played a weekend, Friday and Saturday, and we met 4 o'clock or something for a sound check, get together. You know, one of those rhythm section, and so we show up. It's raining, and Chet shows up, and he's got like an army jacket on and some old cords and shower shoes. You know, and he shows up and we get, you know, when he played the blues, he said, "Oh, great, I'll see you later." You know, and it was fine. You know, I mean, because he was very spontaneous. And come back. That was 4 o'clock. Come back at 9 o'clock, and he's sitting at the bar in the same outfit. You know, in other words, he hadn't gone anywhere.
Oh.
And he was a little wasted. You know.
Yeah.
And he apologized. You know, and I said, "Well, we do what you got to do. Just don't fall off the stage." You know. And the first set was pretty squirrely, and then it got better, you know. And by the end of the night, it was brilliant.
Wow.
You know, I mean, it was like amazing. I mean, how anybody could pull that off. You know, he might have had some help, you know, but it was like going in. I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a disaster. People are waiting in the rain to come in. You know, it's like because he.
Yeah.
And another thing about working with Chet was he had people came to hear him that you never saw anywhere in a jazz club.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
That they wouldn't normally come out to.
I guess not. It was like a cult or something. It was like he had a different kind of a following. I mean, the usual jazz fan that, you know, that you've seen at other concerts might be there. But then there were always these people that he sort of brought out. And the next night he shows up in a suit and all dressed up and looking, you know, totally different.
Wow.
And he even gave us extra money, you know, at the end of the. So you just never knew what to expect, you know. But he was. I liked playing with him. He really was so lyrical, and so pretty, you know.
Sometimes it seems like the general audience likes their jazz musicians to be characters or somewhat tortured or something.
I think so.
You know?
I think
like
so.
We would never be like that, but we like to see something.
I know. You're right. People listen with their eyes, you know, and hopefully musicians listen with their ears. You know, you just gotta. I'll never forget. Al Cohn is probably on that list. I played with Al Cohn, who was a favorite. Man, I love that guy. And I remember one night we were playing somewhere. Did you know Al, or did you ever see him?
I saw him in Rochester years ago.
Al was a very straight-looking guy.
Yeah, he looked like a banker or something.
That's my story. Somebody
come on.
said to him, I swear to God, somebody said to him on the break, you know, and you always get, gee, you don't look like a jazz musician, you look like a banker. And, you know, Al was very droll, and he accepted it, you know, and smiled, and he came over to me and he says, so what does a jazz musician look like? You know?
Yeah.
You know, Al. And it's true. You know, they just want you to be, I shouldn't say that, but it's, I guess some of them want, some of the people that come out, they like the B-movie down and out, I guess, you know.
A little anguish. They see a little anguish.
Yeah, some pain, you know. Al was great. Oh, I loved, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, he was.
Now he had I think I saw him with, was it Zoot Sims that he had the thing with?
Did you ever talk to?
No.
Oh, he told stories about him and Zoot at the Half Note in New York. I was only at that club once, and I heard, who'd I hear there? In the early '60s, like Lenny Tristano or somebody, you know. I just happened to be in town, and it was a funny kind of a club that I think you walked in and you walked around the bar, but the bandstand was above the bar. So the bartenders would be beneath you, you know. So they had this thing worked out where he and Zoot, the bartender, this character, would give them drinks, and when they were done, they had this routine where they would play and they'd drop the glass, and he'd walk by and catch it. You know, I mean, they had this
Cool.
whole thing. You know, I'm sorry, I missed. Somebody might have filmed it. You know,
Uh-huh.
this whole choreography
Yeah.
of the drinks going back and forth. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's neat.
yeah.
What about Benny Carter?
I played with him on 2 occasions. I played a weekend with him at Yoshi's, or maybe more. Mel Martin, saxophone player from the area, put together some stuff for Benny, and it was one was a big band gig right around the corner here at a place called Bimbo's, and he put together a big band, so we played Benny's big band book,
Yeah.
and he is just this. You talk about somebody that wouldn't fit the mold of a tortured jazz musician. This is a real class act. Benny's, you know, he's a composer. He's a film writer, and
Yeah.
and he's I think one of his mottos is always go first class. You know, ask Phil Woods. He says that. You know,
Yeah.
and he does, and he doesn't settle for less, and he's impeccable, and he plays that way. He plays so beautifully, you know. And it was one of those situations where you know you're in the presence of a master.
Uh-huh.
You know, Dizzy's like that, and
Yeah.
people like that. It's just
Yeah.
this is
You treasure that moment.
exactly,
For sure.
exactly. You know, but that's Benny Carter, and his music, of course, is without saying, you know, some of the most
Mm-hmm.
beautiful music in the world. You know.
Yeah, it's interesting you being with a guy like that. You think about his history being in Europe, you know, back in the, in
Oh.
the 30s, and
Yeah.
what kind of experiences he's had.
Yeah, and you know, look what he just came through it with flying colors. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, he just never lost his class.
Yeah.
You know, people are so respectful, and deservedly so. And it's a lesson. You know, you don't have to be anything other than a classy, you know,
Yeah.
individual.
Milt Hinton too. Guys like that.
Milt Hinton, my first recording he was on.
No kidding.
Yeah, Carmen Cavallero.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was with Carmen Cavallero for a year, at 18, and hanging on by the skin of my teeth, you know, because it was demanding. It wasn't a real jazz gig, but it was he carried a quartet. I mean, piano, bass, drums, and guitar. He carried 3 other musicians beside himself. And he had a show, and he played very flashy kind of piano, but tempos and styles, and I had to, you know, come up with that stuff. And so I was with him maybe 6 months, and we were in New York. He lived in New York, and we used to spend a lot of time there. And he was recording for Decca, and he had a record date, and I was going to be on it. And the guitarist, who was also a native New Yorker, but he wasn't going to use the bass player. He was in between bass players. So I showed up at the studio, and they delivered the bass, and I looked, and the tag said Milt Hinton. I went, oh my God, you know? I was scared to death anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I was just petrified, you know. But Milt Hinton, and he came in and just guided me right through it. He was like Benny Carter, this real classy
Wow, that's
guy,
great.
and he knew what he was dealing with. He had this 18-year-old, you know, frightened kid, and I just kept my eye on him, and he just guided me right through it. And you know, so that's my first record.
That's a great
Yeah.
story. This would have been 60 what?
61. Yeah. Were you born yet?
Oh yeah. I have to get your date of birth, by the way, for my records. but-
Okay.
I was looking at your list also, and a fella I listened a lot to was John Handy.
Hmm.
I see you played with him too.
He lives here.
He lives here.
Yeah. John has been here for years. San Francisco, and then he's moved to Oakland 3 or 4 years ago. And he's great. John.
Is he still playing?
Oh
a
yeah,
lot?
he's He doesn't. He's not out as much, you
Mhm.
know. But he's playing. He has a group that I used to play with on occasion. It's called Class. It's himself in a rhythm section, and 3 or 4 violinists,
Oh.
you know, and female violinists.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it probably does.
It-
You know.
Let's put it this way: it's not a negative in selling it.
Yeah, but they're obviously competent musicians because
Yeah.
John is a very competent musician,
Mhm.
and I love John. I love being around him. I love playing with him, and he's a teacher. John's a real natural teacher.
Mhm.
So you know, people are like that when you get on the bandstand there or rehearse. You know, they're the way they go about it, and I have the utmost respect for him. And I've learned a lot being around him, and we've had a lot of fun. And playing with him is always exciting. He's very spontaneous. He can be, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, he's got a pretty good history too, you know,
Yeah.
with Mingus and all that.
That's right.
But yeah, John, he's around, you
Mhm.
know. Did you
I
think
didn't-
about getting
I
together
looked
with him?
for him.
I can give you a number for
I'd
him.
love to get his
Yeah,
number. You know,
yeah.
probably it's a little late this trip. But
Yeah.
I'll have to.
Oh,
I'll have to force myself to come back here.
He'd be a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Bobby Hutcherson also.
Yeah.
I was trying to get.
Yeah.
I didn't. But
Another treasure.
yeah.
Oh. See, we're lucky around here. Donald Bailey is here. Do you know who Donald Bailey
Sure.
is? Yes. Donald Bailey lives in Oakland. And, you know, these are my heroes, these guys, you know. And they're right here,
Right.
you know. So,
Is there or has there been any issue with racial tensions between musicians here or audiences or anything like that over the years?
well, I mean, I think it exists everywhere to a subtle degree, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
but it's easier. I think it's easier here than it is in a lot of places, as far as musicians working with each other. Black musicians, white musicians working together. It's not an issue, to tell the truth. It's just not. You know, there's just there are so-called cliques everywhere. People that have the people they like to play with, and that exists here just like it does everywhere. And sometimes it seems to be an exclusive black clique or an exclusive white clique, but I don't think it wasn't set up that way. It's just the way it happens because
Yeah.
people like to play. But I mean, I work with a lot of different races. You know, I mean, black people. I work with John Handy. I work with Vernon Alley. I work with, you know, I mean, it just doesn't. It's not as what's the word, as overt as it is. I've talked to people like that in New York. Apparently, it's a little more divisive. You know.
Yeah. Is there an Asian influence in,
Yeah.
in
Oh, yeah.
music here?
Yeah. Yeah. There's of course we're on the edge of the Pacific. You know.
Right.
There are, in fact, there's an Asian festival here, jazz festival, and there are musicians that I haven't played with that many. It's more sort of avant-garde, you know, and I'm just a straight-ahead spang-a-lang, you know. I mean, and that's another thing, you know. You just can. I do what I do, you know, and I appreciate all kinds of music, but I do what I do. I'm just not going to spread myself that thin, you know. And try to do everything, you know,
Right.
just to say I could do it, you know. And but there was a musician that he passed a few years ago, a great pianist named Flip Nunez, a Filipino, and I used to work a lot with him, and he was really good. Played with John Hendricks and a lot of different people around here in the 60s and 70s. And then there was another one, a Filipino musician that I played a lot with named George Mirabas, another pianist, great musician. So there is, you know, and of course Latin musicians, a lot of great Latin musicians, so it's pretty diverse around here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your opinion of smooth jazz?
Well, I don't know where they got the name.
Right.
It's like sometimes we play, you play somewhere and you're playing and it's like, it's got this kind of seamless, flawless quality to it, and you might be playing someplace, it might be, as jazz musicians, we work, I play weddings, I
Right,
play,
sure.
but I play the way I play. I'm not going to play, if you want to play, if you want funk or this or that, then you get those guys, you don't get me. Sometimes we play and it's like real sort of subdued and quiet, and after the tune's over, I'll look at the guys and I said, if this ain't smooth jazz, I'll kiss your ass. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a style of music that I like I like hearing tunes and chord changes
Right.
and things like that's all.
Right.
I suppose if I grew up in a different time, I could be doing that. I think about the kids when I deal with kids. I see kids with spiked hair and they got everything going for them. And I'm thinking, well, if I was 16, that's probably where I'd be.
Uh-huh.
Right? How can you not look at it that way?
Sure.
So I feel that way about styles of music,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not for me. I don't want to. Like I said, I like acoustic instruments. Seems to me that smooth jazz or whatever that type of music is mostly electric bass, electric keyboards, and I like
Right.
acoustic sounding instruments.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
leave it there.
Yeah. If you were going to be stranded
Uh-oh.
on a desert beach,
Where did you go to interview school?
I don't pull this question out that often. I'll just say, do you have 3 or 4 recordings that
God.
just are,
That I've worn out?
that you've worn out?
Yeah. Monk at the 5 Spot,
Uh-huh.
Johnny Griffin. Ray Charles with, I guess part of the record is Quincy Jones and part of the record is
Betty Carter?
no, oh God. The arranger.
Oh,
I'm blanking here. The guy that wrote Early Autumn.
oh,
Oh, this is terrible.
oh! I know who you mean too, and I can't think of it.
Anyway, that record.
Ralph.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awful.
Oh,
We'll both think of it later.
Ooh.
Ralph Burns.
Ralph Burns. That record. It's
Yeah.
a great record.
Yeah.
That's 2. You wanted 5, right?
Well,
Let me
I
see,
just-
all right. Train Ballads. I love that record. I love that band. I got to hear that band here in San Francisco. Elvin and McCoy and Jimmy Garrison. Train. And got to put some Miles in there. God, which one? Maybe Milestones. Is that the one with Billy Boy and?
Yes, it is,
Yeah.
and in the tune called Miles of bup 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 bup
Yeah.
bup bup.
Well,
Oh,
but
that's the record.
is that no? Milestones is like, I know that's the tune. The record I'm thinking of is the one with. It's Train and Philly Joe, and they do. They do trio stuff with Red Garland, I guess, with Billy Boy, but they do Salt Peanuts, I think, and stuff like that.
it's
Yeah.
not- it's not
Anyway,
that one.
any of that stuff.
Yeah.
God, it would be hard to pick one.
Right.
There's so many. And Duke. Duke at Newport, I guess, would be the. Any Duke, but that Duke at Newport, is. If someone says, well, what's swing? What's swinging? Just put on Duke at Newport. Put on Diminuendo and Crescendo and Blue.
Uh-huh.
With Paul Gonzalez and Sam Woodyard back there.
Right,
Yeah, that's swinging.
right.
And I don't know, maybe Sinatra, Only the Lonely or something like that, beautiful stuff. There are just too many to.
What about, do your tastes go into, and who do you like in the pop world? Anybody in particular?
Like right now?
Yeah.
Well, I don't find myself in that
Hmm.
arena very often. God. who I heard that I like. Must be somebody out there. I can't. I
Yeah,
really can't think
I
of
don't,
anybody.
I
you
don't
know?
listen to that much
I mean,
myself.
if you're talking about other styles of music, James Brown, of course, and,
Yeah.
and Aretha, and James Taylor I like. I really dig James Taylor. Every now and then I'll see him on something, and I think, I like this guy.
Yeah, he always has a great band too.
Yeah, but his just is, it's kind of folksy, but it's not. It's more, and I don't know. It's just out of the blue stuff that I just think is cool.
Yeah. I have one more piece of music that you're on here. See if you recognize.
Yeah, Tanya
Yeah.
Marie. Is this Yatatra?
Yeah.
Diddly-doo, diddly-doo, diddly-doo. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cooking.
Okay, this interesting story. I'm with Cal Jader, right? This is probably the 80 or thereabouts, 81. And Carl Jefferson, who was Concord Records, calls and says, I want you to do this. We're going to do a record with a Brazilian piano player, singer, that I just signed. And no one ever knew about her. And I said, okay, So he hired Cal's drummer and bass player, Rob Fisher. And was Poncho on that? Is Poncho on this, do you know?
I don't have the liner notes with me.
It's either Poncho or a local conga drummer named Willie Colon.
I think it's Willie Colon.
Willie Colon, okay, not the Willie Colon, New York trombone
Right.
player. This is from here. Yeah, I don't think Poncho did this. Anyway, so we show up at the Coast Recorders, and Tanya's there, and we meet her, and she speaks very little English, and no rehearsal or anything. We're just in the studio. We're getting ready to do this thing, and so nothing is written out. And she says, well, let's hear what you're going to do. So she launches into this tune. This first tune. And we all looked at each other like, what are we going to do? Oh my God. This whole thing that she had worked out, And we just worked it out and recorded it. And that's how it came out. It was like, but we had just like the panic look on everybody's face. Like we're in the studio, and we're going to make this record. And that was it.
Wow.
After a few misruns, whatever you want to call them, we came up with that, and got through it somehow. And the rest of the record was, Eddie Duran's on that, the guitarist. He's on that. And but that was the first thing we did. And of course, I think that was the hardest thing, which is good. Get that out of the way. But it was like, oh my God, I'm in deep doo-doo now, But she's great. Boy.
Yeah.
You talk about
What
energy.
happened to her? She's still around?
She was, let's see, when I met her, she was living in Paris, I think. And, she's from Brazil, and she lived in Paris. And then she moved here shortly after and lived in New York for many years, for quite a few years. And now I understand she's back in Europe. I'm not sure where. But I sort of kept track. When she would come through town, she got more into like a Latin funk thing, pop, Latin funk, and she could do that, She's really something. I was awed by her. She's got a lot of talent, But what we did there was probably the jazziest thing she ever. With the acoustic instruments, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But that was boy, you talk about the look on our faces when she launched into that. It was, oh my God,
That's cool. Desperation leads to inspiration.
Well, I guess. But the thing is, especially, it's one thing to be at a rehearsal and be in trouble.
Right.
But to be in a recording studio, it's like and because the clock is ticking, you know, it's
Yeah.
just like you feel this pressure, you know. But it really came out pretty good. I thought. I mean,
Uh-huh.
in retrospect, you know, it's like, wow.
Well, it sure caught my ear because
Yeah.
I was sitting down with this
Yeah.
record thinking, oh,
Yeah.
let me bring a little excerpt here.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the one that
Yeah.
topped out.
Record. I noticed you said record.
Record.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I'm on records.
Yeah.
Vinyl.
Isn't that something? Well, what's your view on this, on the state of jazz these days? Do you have an opinion on where it's at?
Well, I mean, there's so many things happening in different directions, and and the record industry is very strange. You know, I mean, the CDs or the recording instrument. You know, I don't know. It's just it's almost out of hand. It seems like with people. Yeah, you go to Tower Records, which is right here, and it's overwhelming. And the product that's out there.
Yeah.
You know. And everybody's and this thing about copying and burning CDs and everything. I mean, I feel sorry for people that are just trying to get in there. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to get. I'm content to be, you know, a sideman or just play gigs and just keep playing. As long as I'm playing with good guys, it's fine. I'm happy, and I front my own things and on occasion. But it's really spread out now. I mean, they're which is good, you know. I mean, I guess it's healthy that it's not the same thing. It can't stay the same way, you know. I mean, I like playing swinging music, you know, and that's not going to change. But there's so many influences now that didn't exist or predominate. You know, the world music influences and pop and like everything else. A lot of music or a lot of dominant culture music is aimed at a certain, you know, age group, and you know, you go to a movie, it's car chases and decapitations, you know, and it's just like it's got to be aimed at somebody, you know, not me. And I think that music is like that, you know. And the state of jazz, guys are getting better. I'll tell you. The level of musicianship or the level of technicality, people playing an instrument has gone up considerably.
Yeah.
You know, from when I was starting out. You know, I got kids that are 17 and 18 that I teach in high schools. That can play a bunch of stuff that I can't even, you know, comprehend practically. And so that part is, and it reflects all the instruments. You hear these kids running on the saxophones, or the keyboards, are playing all over the instrument. But like everything else with maturity, that starts to get better, I think.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm mature, starting to appreciate more of that, you know.
Sure.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't dwell on it.
Yeah.
You know. About how the old days or this, yeah, just keep
Right.
doing what you do. As long as I'm healthy and doing what I'm doing, it's fine.
Good.
You know. I play with some younger people, and I this big band I play with, I'm everybody's father. I could be a grandfather in a couple instances. You know. I'm going to be 60 next month, and there are kids in there that are 20, so I guess I could be a grandfather.
guess.
You know. You know, I'm playing. You know.
Yeah. All of a sudden, you're the elder statesman.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they open doors for me.
You're the Milt Hinton.
Give me a chair. You know.
There could be an advantage to that, you know.
Well,
carry your drums in and out.
I'm
you know?
going to milk it. Believe me. You know. Can you help me with this? You know. You know, I'm married to a musician. I'm married to a singer. I don't know if you knew that. Madeline Eastman, real good singer, and that works good.
Good.
You know, we're not the atypical husband-wife work together all the time. You know, we do, but we don't.
Yeah.
And it works fine. You know, we keep it that way.
Right.
Yeah, we're like a lot of husband and wife teams are the Bickersons on stage. You know what I mean? It's too fast. It's too slow. Wrong key. You know, we get a kick out of that. You know. You're not going to wear that
You
dress.
counted it off.
Yeah, right. You're right.
Oh boy.
All right.
Well, it's been a real pleasure for me.
Same here.
And,
Same here. Early in the morning, I didn't know.
Yeah, right.
You know, once we get going, though,
Right.
it's cool. You know.
Well, I hope
Fortunately, I live down the street.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 2 blocks away. You know, which is real cool.
Well, great. I hope I see you at Pearls maybe before we leave.
Yeah. Trying to think. I'll be there tonight with a saxophone player from LA, a guy named Bruce Escovitz, who happens to be teaching at the Stanford Jazz Workshop. I saw him yesterday. And so he's playing with us being kind of put together rhythm section. And then the weekend, I don't know who's there this weekend, but there's always good music there.
Okay.
And by all means, check it. And talk to the guy that runs the joint, Sonny Buxton. Very interesting man.
Okay.
Yeah. He's got his own radio show on Saturdays. You might catch him if you're Saturday between 10 and 2 on KCSM 91.1. He's got a good show.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for your time today.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.